What is your reaction to the general idea that hosting the World Cup prompted some cities to do something about their homelessness issues?
Why did it take that? Why do we have to pretend we're something we're not?
We as a very proud country is very much like a proud individual. We like to hide our dark side. We like to hide what's in our closet.
FIFA estimates that the 2026 tournament will provide $17 billion in GDP growth in the United States and create approximately 185,000 jobs.
This can be a win-win. Every city could win if they were able to invest into the nonprofit world in addressing homelessness. They would, because you're going to get the unsightly things that people talk about and the people that complain about. You're going to get it off the streets.
I don't know what their wraparound services are. I know that if the wraparound services don't include mental health, substance abuse, and holding people accountable, it's not going to be as successful as it sounds.
Now, I'm one of these people that feels like, well, whatever created the motivation, at least we're doing something. But if they don't do the follow-up, it's just another show. And you know, the show's getting old.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tracy Lewis from Imagine Marketing. I'm joined by Pastor Scott, who's the founder and CEO of Matthews Hope, as well as Shelley Bradford, who is the president and executive directors of Matthews Hope. This podcast is produced, filmed, and edited by John Burkett with Imagine. Welcome to this week's episode of Straight Talk, No BS with Matthews Hope, presented by Imagine Marketing. At Imagine Marketing, we put in the extra effort to craft a tailored strategy for success. We also offer photography, videography, and even podcast production services. Book a free consultation today. In this episode, we will be talking about the World Cup and how hosting visitors from around the world prompted several host cities here in the U.S. to attempt to address their unhoused populations. We will discuss whether the intentions seem genuine or represent a lasting commitment to helping people, or if they are simply attempts to window dress cities to make a good impression on international travelers. At the time of this filming, we are less than a week away from the World Cup final, which will be held in New Jersey. Over a span of 39 days, the U.S. State Department and FIFA expected up to 10 million visitors across all host cities and up to 1.24 million exclusively coming for the tournament. In the United States, the 11 host cities for the tournament included Atlanta, Boston, Dallas, Houston, Kansas City, Los Angeles, Miami, New Jersey, Philadelphia, the San Francisco Bay Area, and Seattle. FIFA estimates that the 2026 tournament will provide $17 billion in GDP growth in the United States and create approximately 185,000 jobs. Wow. Before we look at several specific examples from various cities, what is your reaction to the general idea that hosting the World Cup prompted some cities to do something about their homelessness issues?
Why did it take that? Why do we have to pretend we're something we're not?
Yeah, I think that's very fair, and anybody who takes issue with that, I think they need to be paying attention to what we do on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to believe, and I realize that some will automatically believe, that a true effort was being made to assist the homeless. I would suggest more likely they were looking to hide the homeless, because we as a very proud country is very much like a proud individual. We like to hide our dark side.
Yeah.
We like to hide what's in our closet. And I've been fortunate enough to travel throughout the world, and I can tell you homelessness is an issue throughout the world, but how other countries are handling it compared to us, they are light years ahead of us. So, you know, I have some reservations, and we'll be watching closely, especially over the next few months, because it was going to show itself really quick.
Real quick.
If this was just one of those things that they were, you know, let's hide them and then cut them loose again. So we'll see.
That's a good point. So let's take a look at a few specific cities, starting with Dallas. This story is from NBC Dallas-Fort Worth and was posted 8 weeks ahead of the start of the World Cup.
Dallas is working to put its best face forward.
Yes, and that includes, of course, public safety measures and a renewed commitment to homelessness solutions. Important discussions are happening around. Candace Sweat has the story.
Leaders of the Dallas Street to Home initiative say the goal to end homelessness hasn't let up since its inception in 2024. With Dallas just weeks away from FIFA's international spotlight, the work continues.
FIFA really is a great opportunity to figure out how do we expand that as we're preparing for FIFA, because what we didn't want to happen in our community is that we would just put up a big temporary shelter with all the resource that we have for 3 months and then let hundreds of people right back on the street of downtown.
The Citizens Homeless Commission held its regular meeting where the lead agency for homeless response in Dallas County gave a quarterly report. Sarah Kahn of Housing Forward says phase 2 of the Street to Home initiative will be a chief focus in 2026, making sure shelter beds lead to permanent housing.
When our shelter beds stay full, that's the dynamic where we have a lot of people being forced to sleep outside. And that's what we're really trying to change this year by kind of transforming shelter from a waiting room to a launch pad.
This as flyers passed out by the Dallas Police Homeless Outreach Team faced scrutiny from grassroots organizations. The flyers suggest, quote, safe and legal camping options at nearby state parks. Dallas Police responded to NBC5 about the flyers, saying this flyer is a resource information sheet shared by our homeless outreach team to individuals they encounter. The officers on the HOT team provide education on city ordinances and state laws regarding camping, offer to connect individuals with shelter and housing options, medical treatment, and other services to assist those experiencing homelessness. Former Dallas Mayor Laura Miller also joining the conversation with goals to expand her private initiative called the Ladder Project.
We are 11 volunteers. We have no overhead. We don't have an office. We go to the synagogue for meetings. We don't have salaries. All the money that we have goes to the homeless.
The commission reaffirming its goals as an advisory board today as global attention nears.
One individual in that story explained that when shelter beds stay full, that's when we have the dynamic of a lot of people needing to sleep outside. And that's why they are trying to transform shelters from waiting rooms to launch pads. What are your thoughts on that?
So actually, this is where I grew up. I grew up this is going to sound really wrong. I grew up in Dallas, walking these streets because that's where I went to church. That's where I went to school. I don't see it any better than it was 40 years ago. The Dallas Life Foundation, I think, has done a lot to try to be that shelter landing place for people. But just like in Orlando, there's only so many beds. And what do you do? And I have not seen from afar, I don't live there anymore, but I've not seen a different in their dynamics today than it was 40 years ago. In fact, when I went last year, we stayed in downtown Dallas. I wanted to specifically to stay in downtown Dallas. There were people lined on the streets at bed at night. And it really made me sad.
You know, I think that the story makes some good points that I agree with, that if a shelter bed stays full and there's no place else to go, then you've got to figure something out. What I didn't hear was that the city of Dallas was involved in some way. And I truly believe until the cities come together with nonprofits in their area that serve like Matthews Hope does, that this is just going to be a perpetual issue going from one generation to the next. Because I can tell you, in Matthews Hope has been in existence in over 16 years, and I've been serving in the homeless community for over 20. And in Orlando, which we're closest to, there really hasn't been an expansion of beds in years. Now, there's a small expansion going on right now, I believe, with the Homeless Coalition. However, when you compare it to the numbers that we're seeing, it's a drop in the bucket. It really is. It's kind of like when I told someone the other day, they said, "Oh my gosh, you've got your sleeper buses going. How cool is that? You know, you're sleeping 60 people a night, that type of thing." And I started to do the math, and that was something like, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but it's something like 18,000 sleep filled nights, which was huge. But then I said, but let me put it in perspective. I said, we in Brevard alone, we have registered 1,753 homeless people this last year. So the numbers the math doesn't math. I would encourage that if anybody out there that's in the leadership form of any city or state or county, that they would take some time to make some contact with their local nonprofits and find out who's doing what, and what they can do to support making that happen. I can tell you that if we had the support of the cities in a significant way, I'm not saying we don't have some support, we do. Popka has been stepping to the plate. Titusville has a little bit, Palm Bay. And, you know, but the reality of it is the money that we're receiving from them barely show up on our radar. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm saying it takes so much more that if we were working together, we could come up with some solutions. To ever kid yourself to believe we're going to eradicate homelessness you know, again, I'm going to remind people, I'm not a religious guy. I am a pastor. I am a Christ follower. Don't even call myself a Christian anymore, but I got reasons for that. But I'm a Christ follower, and my understanding is that they will be with us till the end of time. But that doesn't mean we don't pay attention. It doesn't mean we don't participate. And so it's going to be very interesting. In Dallas, we're watching you. We'd like to see you carry on. You know, things are going to end here shortly. These folks are going to all be going home. Now what?
You're right. So speaking of money, let's go into my next question. Estimates of the economic impact of the World Cup on North Texas range as high as $1.5 to $2 billion. How could applying some of that revenue to permanent solutions for homelessness bring value to that area long after the World Cup has ended?
I mean, Scott's already said it. The best thing that they could do is they could support the local nonprofits that are already doing this. Not working with people that know what they're doing and trying to figure it out on your own, that's just a waste of resources and money.
Yeah, I think that most of us of any significance, we have, we're audited every year, independent audits, we're required to go that. So look and see how people are using their money, see what services are offering, but trying to reinvent the wheel over and over again is ridiculous. And I've watched, you know, going back to like a Popka, they've been literally spinning their wheels now for a dozen years that I can remember. And, you know, we can't say, well, we're talking about that, we're looking at that, we're trying to, no, you got to take some action. And the reality of it is there are people out there already. You know, I heard the one woman that talks about the 11 volunteers, no overhead. I'm just going to say it to you. If you happen to ever see this, is, you know, I thought that way as well. I've got several hundred volunteers now and roughly a $15 million budget that I never planned on. It takes money. It takes time. It takes a lot of resources. However, I will tell you that if you're proactive instead of reactive, it's a lot less expensive.
Correct. Yep.
So, Scott, could applying some of that revenue to permanent solutions for homelessness bring value to that area long after the World Cup has ended?
Tracy, is this a trick question? Look, here's the reality. Let's say selfishly. Let's go ahead and go with selfish. Let's go ahead and say, forget about the homeless altogether. If it made sense now, wouldn't it make sense in the long run? We're always talking about property values. We're always talking about how welcoming our city looks. We're always talking about those things. If it's good now, wouldn't common sense, I realize common sense isn't all that common, but wouldn't common sense tell you that that's a strong investment for future and ongoing using those kind of resources? I mean, that's the way I look at it. And you're killing two birds with one stone. You're addressing the homeless issue and you're doing what you claim you want to do. You know, I'm always talking about that. You know, Orlando's called the city beautiful, and they've done everything in their power to hide the homeless. And I have challenged them years. They never want to sit down and talk about that part of it. You know, that's the truth. You can't. It's not about hiding anybody, but if it's a good investment for the city overall, and you're killing two birds with one stone, it seems to me that would be something you step back and go, that worked. Let's continue with that. And that's what I would like to see. I'm doubtful and skeptical. I'm hopeful.
Let's take a look at another host city. This story by Manuel Valdez with the Associate Press that was published on June 9th and talks about Seattle's preparation for the World Cup.
Scores of travelers are expected to visit the United States during the World Cup, and they might see firsthand one of the nation's most protracted issues, homelessness.
It's definitely reached a crisis point. The World Cup does not change the fact that it's a problem that needs to be dealt with. I think it serves as a catalyst for us to really talk about it in a more meaningful way.
Federal data shows about 750,000 people are homeless in this country, but a third of them live on the streets, and experts acknowledge that's likely an undercount. It's an issue in rural and urban areas, but one that is clearly present in many of the tournament host cities, including Seattle. New Seattle Mayor Katie Wilson set a goal of 500 new unit shelters before the World Cup started. Her administration fell short by hundreds, but a new 75-person shelter space is opening. The site, built by pallet shelters, includes single-person units with heat and air conditioning, along with community services.
The reality is, after the World Cup, we now have one place and hopefully more, right? We're going to build more. We want to scale this model and just housing in general and services in general. And once we use this to show the efficacy of the model and that it can work to really help people recover and rehabilitate and get back to life and back to self-sufficiency, then we have the backing we need to scale this.
People living on the street are the hardest cases for city leaders to solve, often involving substance abuse or mental health issues. Experts say what's seen on the street just tells part of the country's homeless story.
It's jarring to see, but what we don't see is the women and children in shelter, the people living in their cars, showering at the YMCA, then going to their jobs, and it's a complex group of people who experience homelessness.
At an cabin just blocks from the stadium, people said they had not heard from the city about plans for them, but they are expecting to be moved.
I mean, of course. I mean, it's 300 yards that way, so. I don't know, but I guess because the world's coming, you don't want homeless people around. I don't know. I mean, I get it, but it is what it is.
What are your thoughts on that story?
I will say that I was just in Seattle last year, and what I found very interesting is you did not see as many homeless people downtown as I expected. What you did see is up and down every major highway corridor. Along these sides on each side, it almost like it's like a hill on each side, tents from top to bottom. It'd be like, imagine if we were going down here in our area, down in I-4 or 95, and it had embankments that people were camping on. That's what I saw. Now, what I find interesting about the story is, if I understood their mayor correctly, she said there was plans for 500, and they were only able to get 75 done. The truth of this story will come out in, apparently they had funded it, and so they will continue to build the other 425 and make that commitment true. And that will prove whether it's about the World Cup or whether it was about actually making a difference. I suspect that if we go back a year from now, you will not see 500 small units, the pallet houses. My hope is you will.
Well, and you have to have a place to put them as well. And I don't know their topography to know if they have the place to put 500.
But I have to assume if the mayor, right,
sure,
was making that comment, then there was funding and there was places in mind where they would do that. And so I think that's a fair assumption. Your question is valid, Shelley. I mean, it's very valid. But again,
it takes up a lot of space.
Well, if you're going to go on television and tell people this is our plan, then you're going to come back out and say, well, you know what, we fell short. But the good news is we realize that this is an important issue, and we're going to continue. We're going to build out those next 425, and then we're going to figure out where to go from there. So Seattle, again, we're watching.
Yeah.
Let's see what you do here. Or are you just going to sit there and go, well, that took care of whatever we could do while World Cup was here. Now that everybody's gone, everything's back to normal.
I hope not.
Now, I will tell you out there, and we're seeing a lot more mental health than ever. And I can't not comment on this real quick. And you'll probably hear it in every podcast we do, is the most visible homeless are those with several serious mental illness. You don't see all the people, the baby boomers, the children, the physically and mentally disabled. That's a very different thing from mental illness. You don't see those folks that they've outlived their caregivers becoming homeless. And so what you also don't talk about, and usually they say substance abuse and then mental illness. I would suggest that mental illness became before the substance abuse. Typically, my experience has been, as someone who has experienced substance abuse myself, who has been homeless, it's typically a byproduct of becoming homeless or byproduct to one's mental health. And they're looking for an escape because the truth is, not one of these cities that we're talking about, including the one we live in, is really investing very heavily in mental health. And that is what you're really seeing. We have a mental illness problem more so than we have a homeless problem. Most of the homeless you're not even going to see in reality.
Scott, you mentioned you were in Seattle last year and saw tents lining the banks around major roadways. By not clearing those camps like we have here in Florida, is that in some way actually better for the people experiencing homelessness there?
I don't know if it's better. And again, I don't know what they've changed since I was there and spent some time there last year. Um, but what I will say is these folks have to have some place to stay. And when we talk about camps, again, those of you that are campers, I can assure you that being homeless and camping aren't alike at all. So I really hate that term.
Yeah.
And, what we're seeing here in Florida is through HB 1365, which we've talked about before, that created it really to illegal to sleep outside. And the funny part is most of the camps, we've been doing this for a long time, most of the camps are not visible from the road. The fact that we're sending police officers in and sheriffs into the woods to find the camp, to tell them to go away, what is that accomplishing? Well, what it does, number one, is it scatters them, which could make it tougher for them to get the resources they need access to. Number two, they're typically going to go back into the city because that's where the easiest places are for makeshift shelter and food. I never lived in the woods. I lived in the city. So, tucking behind a dumpster is not that hard. And I assure you, if you go into most cities and you walk them at night, you're going to find people living in those little hallways and crevices and behind dumpsters and what have you, because that's just easy and the food is close by. You're going to, if you panhandle, which most people that know me know I don't like, and most people at panhandle are in fact not homeless, but the ones that are, they don't need to make a lot of money from that to be able to go down to the local bodega or what have you and get a sandwich. And so I think it's an interesting question. I just don't know that we can come up with a solid answer. What I do think is that the answer is we do need to find a way, again, to make the cities, the counties, the states, the feds, making an effort to actually address homelessness rather than hide it. And I think we can accomplish both. We can take it out of the public eye if they're willing to invest, and we can get a lot of these people involved in a life of independence and self-sustainability that will no longer be on the streets. And lastly, we would be able to hopefully address some of the mental illness that's out there. And though we can't make that go away, we can certainly give these people a better life, and a better life for them, a better life for us. I mean, this can be a win-win. Every city could win if they were able to invest into the nonprofit world in addressing homelessness. They would, because you're going to get the unsightly things that people talk about and the people that complain about. You're going to get it off the streets. One other thing I'll mention too is we should unlock public bathrooms again. And I wrote a story recently on this, that everybody poops. It's a great children's book, but it's a fact. And what's happened in many of these cities also, including the ones that we work in, I think we're in about 25 municipalities now. I haven't counted lately, but pretty much, I believe in all of them, the bathrooms are closed in public parks at night. And then someone complains because someone pooped. Well, what the hell do you think was going to happen? One thing I'm pretty confident of every day. Now, imagine someplace like Seattle that has all these people. When I say a lot, Tracy, I'm talking about from bottom to top, a hill that is probably 100 feet high, tent after tent after tent after tent. But the one thing you notice in there, first, it was on a hill. So people are laying at a kind of an odd angle, living kind of an odd angle. There weren't porta potties there. So I don't know what's happening there. I don't know what the answer is. But again, I would suggest that probably it's kind of unpleasant. So I just wanted to throw that into the mix that, when I get complaints, often the complaint I get when I'm at whether it's a city commission meeting or what have you, is about someone defecating in public behind a bush. And my question every time is, well, what do you suggest? You've locked the bathrooms. what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah.
There's one thing I know that most of us that are healthy, you're going to poop.
That's
Okay. I
something
mean,
to
it's just
think
going to
about
happen.
because we don't, as normal or as the community, we don't think about that. We just go to the bathroom.
No, you're right.
So
Right.
that's a good point
I
to
mean,
bring up.
can you, I mean, think about it for a minute. You know, I mean, it was much easier when I was homeless. It's been a lot of years. It's got progressively worse. I could go into public bathrooms and nobody questioned it. Now you see the sign that says public bathrooms in a restaurant. We usually say restrooms are for paying customers only. I get that. I appreciate that. But when you have a public park, public, last I understood, public meant us. It meant
Taxpayers.
anybody, taxpayers,
Yeah.
but even non-taxpayers, because you got to remember, as a citizen of the United States, you're not required to be a taxpayer.
True.
Okay. So, but to the benefit of the taxpayers, instead of bitching and moan about what that's going on, I don't know, put a camera out there and see when the bad guy comes out, and maybe go after the one bad guy instead of sweeping all of them off the
Right.
streets.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I know that's a little off topic, but believe me, it plays in this because any place you look, just know everybody's got to poop.
Yep. Next, let's take a look at Atlanta. Here's a story from 11 Alive that was posted 1 year ahead of the World Cup.
Ahead of the big matches, Atlanta is taking some huge steps to address homelessness. Ariane Manise explains the strategy and why leaders say that this is not just about the games.
Before Atlanta enters the global stage for the 2026 FIFA World Cup, the city is working behind the scenes to cut down on homelessness.
We see the additional energy for housing individuals right now, and we are capitalizing on that.
The goal is to rehouse 400 unsheltered people by the end of the year.
Work will continue for years past the World Cup.
Annie Hyrilla with Partners for Home says the work began long before FIFA picked Atlanta.
So we're not doing this just because of the World Cup. We're doing this to house individuals and to keep people housed.
The nonprofit is leading the plan called Downtown Rising, which is part of a $212 million strategy to end unsheltered homelessness in Atlanta. Hyrilla says dozens of outreach workers are on the ground helping connect those who are in need the most.
They will be able to assess individuals, get them document ready, and moved in as units are coming online.
Construction is underway at wrapping housing sites across the city. Waterworks opening in November will have 100 units, including 30 with round-the-clock medical and mental health care.
The units are being built off-site, then they'll be brought on-site. We'll fully furnish them. They'll have kitchenettes, bathrooms.
And just down the road, 405 Cooper Street, the site of another rapid housing site the city recently broke ground on.
So Cooper Street introduces an innovative development.
Mayor Andre Dickens says this was once home to one of Atlanta's largest encampments. Cooper Street now has a new future. Those still struggling hope this momentum continues.
Living somewhere that no one would ever want to live. Instead of trying to run everybody off, get them really permanent housing.
Partners for Home has already housed 49 people toward their goal of 400 and hope to exceed that goal even after the fanfare of the World Cup leaves the city.
We're investing in permanent supportive housing, and I think that really illuminates our commitment.
What were your impressions of the Downtown Rising program?
I don't know what their wraparound services are. I know that if the wraparound services don't include mental health, substance abuse, and holding people accountable, it's not gonna be as successful as it sounds.
Yeah, I would agree. Now they mentioned, I did hear them mention mental health
I
care,
did,
medical care, what have you. And again, I think that's really important. Look, there's going to be people that automatically say, oh, free housing, people are going to take advantage of it.
Yep.
And you're not wrong.
Yep.
There will be people try to take advantage of it. You know, from a pastoral standpoint, I can tell you, I can show you scripture where it says, you work, you eat. I can also show you that where it says that we're to care for those that cannot care for themselves. So I think it's real important you have a comprehensive program, much like Matthew's Hope does, that filters this through. And we try to figure out what to, for lack of a better term, to put them down. Is that someone that makes sense for our transitional housing that we can work towards becoming independent and self-sufficient? Is that someone who, truth is, until we get them fully mentally stable, which may never happen, or be able to have something to put them I don't like institutions.
Sure.
But some people need 24/7 care. So that's another tube, which again really doesn't exist, but that's one we're looking at. And then you have this other area that you look at those people that one thing we're seeing right now is our fastest growing population is baby boomers. What's the end game for them? I'm 64 years old, and I'll put my resume against anybody's. The challenge is at 64 years old, as strange as it sounds as I'm sitting here, my life expectancy is about another 12 to 15 years. Companies aren't going to invest in me. They're not going to invest in me because of I'm most likely not going to be able to work full time that many more years in their eyes. You've got the other, situation where you have people that have just simply they're disabled, but not disabled to the point they can't care for themselves. But they need a helping hand. They need almost like assisted living. So, but we have to look at how's that going to be funded? Because I would think that, again, in Florida, and I can only speak to Florida, I've been traveling all over, but Florida is where I live, is I can tell you that we are not putting any funding towards any of this kind of thing. In fact, we're not even talking about it. No one wants to have the conversation. And the question I ask just the other day, we had 178 people there. And I was doing a tour, and I said, take a look around the room for a minute. What do you see? And the two women were looking around, and they said, well, first off, I see a lot of white hair. I said, okay. And then I said, I see a lot of wheelchairs and walkers. I said, exactly. What's the end game for them? So we need to be looking at that, each of these cities, because again, the problem you have with permanent supportive housing, and I've never been a huge fan for this reason, is that you don't get that just because you don't want to. You get that because you absolutely can't. And I think it's something, because your choice is, it's cheaper than incarcerating people. It's cheaper than allowing them to live on the streets. It's more palatable to the general public because they're not seeing these people. Because everybody that walks past one of these people, I used to think 70 was old. Now that I'm 64, I'm rethinking that.
Yeah.
But they pass a 70-year-old guy on a walker and they go, oh, that's awful. And that's as far as that goes.
Yeah.
No one likes it, but nobody's really talking about it. Now you got to change your thinking and saying, well, if that was your father or mother, if that was your grandparents, would it be okay with you? It's kind of like when Sheriff Ivey from Brevard County got after me because I was upset that an 85-year-old woman was left on our porch with a severe ankle injury and dementia out the wazoo, and was left there. And I pointed it out, and the news picked it up. They pointed it out. He called me a liar. Well, I say that bullshit. Okay. Let's look at the tape. I'll show you again. You got to stop this going back. Look, he's not an enemy. I don't know him. Maybe he's a fine individual who just has some ideas that just are not well thought out. I don't know him personally, but I don't know most of the people I talk to, whether it be in law enforcement or the city managers or mayors and commissioners and what have you. I don't know them personally. For me to suggest they're bad people, I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm saying they're making some bad decisions. I'm saying they're making some bad policy, but calling someone a liar is really, and that's the worst part. He said, I think he called me a bag of crap. Okay. Whatever. If that makes him feel a little bigger, puff your chest out, doesn't matter to me. But what matters to me is, yes, in fact, your deputy left that woman on her porch. Now, the sad news for us is that, yes, my medical team was able to get her to the hospital, but then what? Right. And see, because here's the other thing. Once we get them in the hospital, there's no one calling us and saying, now what?
Right.
So we have to assume what normally happens is they're let out, often in the middle of the night. Again, people will deny that, but that's when most homeless people are let out of jail. And when are left out of hospitals or in the middle of the night. We don't know where she's at. We don't know if she's still alive. We don't know what's going on. And again, I think we can do better.
Yeah. In that story, the mayor talked about a new housing complex on the site of what was once one of the largest encampments in the city. Do you like that idea?
I kind of think it's a little cool. It's almost like we're bringing these people back home because that was home to them.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can better their lives somehow, that would be great. I just stand very firm on, I hate the term wraparound services, but I stand very firm on the accountability and making sure Because one of the things that we've heard Scott say 1,000 times, and he'll say it 1,000 more times, and it's okay, is just because I have a garage, you're not going to put me in it and say I'm a car. So, these people are going to still be homeless if we cannot help them see the value of that home that they're living in.
So as Shelley just mentioned, she's talking about what's cool about this is they're building it on a site of one of the largest camps, and talk about bringing them home. And that's a great analogy, because there's this idea by some people, being that we live in Florida, that we have homeless snowbirds. That just doesn't exist. I'm not saying it's never happened. It just doesn't exist. What our data has shown over the last 16 years, along with the point in time count data in both Orange County and Brevard County, in Osceola County and Seminole County, that's the kind of all Central Florida there, has shown anywhere between 81 and 88% of the people they served in those prospective areas were homegrown. And so, I tell people all the time, yes, they may not have a house, but this is their home. And so building it where they're already at makes a whole lot of sense. It really does.
It does.
And I think I think it's here's the other part. We see battle after battle after battle, not in my backyard.
Huh.
Orlando has tried, Orange County has tried to put in some additional shelters and what have you, and discuss about ways of housing the homeless. And every time it happens, some group steps up, usually not even from that neighborhood. They're usually from a few miles out, which I never have understood. Come in there, bitch and moan and complain and push until everybody stops, because quite honestly, what do politicians want? They want votes. And they don't want to tick anybody off, and they don't want to be controversial. Can you imagine if we actually had someone controversial in a positive way? That'd be amazing. Any case, I watch this and I go, man, I'm rooting them on, because it sounds like a plan that was put into place before any thought of being part of the World Cup.
Yep.
And so that's a positive, and it sounds like it's ongoing. From what I understand is the city was involved in helping support that financially. And again, it's going to take the public and private and sector coming together. And if we do that, I promise people that literally before the day I die, we will make such a huge impact on what's going on in the community if they would just quit buying into the fear stories. Before we all turn communist, for God's sakes, let's get away. It's not the McCarthy era. And I use that as an extreme example, but we're seeing that on a local level. We're seeing people say, oh my God, what if this, what if this? How about, oh my God, what is possible?
Yeah.
I can find 1,000 reasons why something won't work. But if you're willing to work with us, along with those other places in your communities, watch what happens. And if you're a believer, watch how God honors that. It'll be pretty cool.
That's good.
I'm waiting and I'm watching.
Let's look at one more example of a U.S. host city. This story is from KSHB 41 in Kansas City 3 months ago.
We've been covering the changes Kansas City has made for the World Cup. We're talking more security, more transportation options, even more homes for international visitors staying over the summer.
But all these fast changes makes you question, what can we do to help those who are here who need it most? We already have so many who live here without a home of their own. Earlier this year, Kansas City launched a program to quickly house people experiencing homelessness. At the time, some community advocates questioned the timing and motivations behind the efforts.
What is the World Cup going to do? I think they want to get the homeless away from the streets to provide a facelift.
Well, tonight, as a voice for everyone, KSHB 41 Kansas City reporter Lenita Brooks follows up with community advocates on the progress being made to help those without a home.
With the World Cup quickly approaching, city leaders have approved a plan to expand housing for the homeless. But advocates say it comes a little too late.
Documented somewhere between like 2,400. Undocumented, I said the number can be 4,000 people.
That's the amount of people Anton Washington, Executive Director of Creative Innovative, says are living unhoused in Kansas City. As the city seeks to address that number ahead of the World Cup, he says time is running out.
We should have started this months ago. However, here is April 2nd. It's not enough time, and we're 2 months away from the World Cup here in Kansas City.
Greg Parr with Neighbor to Neighbor
It sounds like a facelift.
agrees.
Definitely don't think that's enough time. If it does, it's going to be, like you said, a temporary place for people to be placed in homes.
The proposal also focuses on connecting the houseless to resources, health care, behavioral health services, and employment opportunities. Parr believes substance abuse and mental health also should be included.
I would love for some of that money to be put into the neighborhood associations that are on the front lines and serving the homeless every day and coming up with solutions every day. Like we help 8 to 15 men and women get off the street every month and into treatment centers and recovery housing.
In a statement, Mayor Pro Tem Raina Park-Shaw said the resolution has been held, but she will continue working with employers, housing leaders, and community partners to build real pathways to stability. This effort is about long-term solutions that strengthen Kansas City well beyond the World Cup.
We need to be able to think about the long term after the World Cup.
One person in that video said he was concerned this is mostly a facelift, but the mayor said she is committed to supporting these initiatives long after the World Cup. How would success be measured in a situation like this?
Well, it would not look good if the mayor didn't say that. It would make her look a little shallow. How would you measure the success? That's a really good question, because our metrics and your metrics as a layperson that doesn't work in what we do every day are totally different. But it all goes back to, again, the comprehensive services and making sure that these people, are truly housed and not out of sight.
Yeah, I'm with Shelley in this. I mean, what was she supposed to say?
Right.
That said, again, who's going to hold the feet to the fire to show that this wasn't just a move based on the World Cup? That kind of stuff will get you voted in and out of office. Mm-hmm. And so to not follow through, in my opinion, would be foolish if she wants to stay in office. But the skepticism always there is, why now? I'm one of these people that feels like, well, whatever created the motivation, at least we're doing something. But if they don't do the follow-up, it's just another show. And the show's getting old. We watched the show in Washington. We watched the show up in Tallahassee here. We watched the show in our local government. The show is getting old. Yeah. It's time to start talking to our taxpayer public servants for who they are. They're public servants that are funded by us. Let's get this stuff done. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we're just going to go down this dark hole of someone else telling us what's good for us, and like it or, whatever. I've been to Kansas City. There seems to be people. I have friends that live up there. I think there's people in place to make something happen, but we're going to have to keep, hold people's feet to the fire and see. I'd really like to take a look at Kansas City and some of the, we've talked about Dallas today. We have talked about Atlanta, a couple other, Seattle. I really want to see 6 months from now. I think that one of the things we need to do in our podcast here is revisit it 6 months from now and find out, was it where we just sold another line of BS? Because quite honestly, I think that people are tired of the drama and the stuff we're seeing in Washington and Tallahassee and sometimes our local government that are just blowing smoke up our backsides to make us feel good for the short term. And then there's no follow through.
Right.
And I can, unfortunately, in my 64 years, can show you one example after another.
Absolutely.
Of, you got the votes, now what? You're a public servant, you're taxpayer funded, let's go.
Yeah. There was an individual in that story that said he wished the funds would go to neighborhood organizations that are really in the trenches. Is that a common problem you see when it comes to funds being allocated by municipalities or the government?
Yes. Now, there's two sides of the story. Okay, first off, there are hundreds of do-gooders that, truth is, the funding is wasted on them because they can't offer all that needs to be put out there, right? I mean, we're seeing a consolidation of nonprofits, which is good and bad. The good news is Matthew's Hope for us is that we're typically, if we're not the biggest in the conversation, we're darn close to it. So we always get the second look. The downside to it is as some of these smaller nonprofits disappear, it's stuff that we're going to have to absorb. So there's a fine line to walk there. But what I will say, and I've said this for years, when you look at, I'm going to give you the example of Orange County in Florida. Some of the same money has been gone to the same people, and nobody has really bothered to look at what their success is. Now, the hard part is when you talk about metrics, people are always trying to get, well, how many people get off the streets? That's the wrong question. Okay. The real question is, how many people have you successfully led to the very best possible life they can have? Because for some people, for me, just getting them in the shower and fresh clothing on, that's a really good day. For others, getting them on the medications they need to settle out the voices in their head, that's a really good day. For others, until they finish that college degree or get that job that makes them fully independent, self-sufficient, it's not good. So we can't just glob these people together and throw in the middle of the table and say, well, what's the answer? There's no one answer for anybody. So you need to be, again, that public-private sector coming together and identifying who is filling those holes and what holes need to be filled. And then how do we use funds in such a way that we can go back and say, okay, let's ask the bigger question, not how many did we get housed, but how many did we move forward? And I think that's a more fair question, because people ask, what's your success rate? And I go, it's 100%. They look at me like, wow, how'd you do that? And I said, well, first off, again, what is successful for one isn't necessarily successful for another. These are individuals. They became homeless in different ways. They have different issues, and you have to address them very much as a single human being.
That's so good. What would Matthew's Hope want viewers to understand about the difference between making homelessness less visible and making homelessness less common?
I think you can have both. I really, and I've stated earlier, I think that it can be a win-win, but it's not going to be a win-win until some of the foolish guidelines, in my opinion, are taken off some of these grants that are available, and more look at the overall picture. And I truly believe, look, we're taking 60 people off the streets to sleep now. That's 60 people that aren't being seen, right? And that's going to, as small as that is, that's going to impact, because a lot of those very same people were sleeping downtown. They were sleeping in the middle of the village. And so, that's the small impact you see from that. But what the buses are about when we go forward is really, how do we connect them to the rest of the services to tell the rest of the story? How do we get this person connected to these things, to these things, to these things? What tube do we push them down to get the best possible outcome we can, the best bang for the buck, if you will? And often the grants are written in such a way it's really tight, and it only allowed to use for one thing. And well, there's not one answer, so why are we trying to make it affect one thing? When people don't like how we do things, Tracy, I often say to them, I'm not trying to corner the market on homelessness. If you'd like to open up a place across the street, I'll give you a starter 6-pack of homeless people to start. And I said, here's what's going to look like. You're going to find that woman that came out of domestic violence and fled with her children. You're going to see the alcoholic. You're going to see the guy that aged out of employment. You're going to see the drug addict. You're going to see the veteran. And just for fun, I'm going to throw in a schizophrenic, because on a daily basis, that is the range of what we're seeing. People that just got broadsided by life, others that have come through, become disabled because of age or because of an accident, what have you. There's so many things that play into this that most people sit back in their chair and play armchair quarterback, talking about what we're doing wrong. Well, my question is, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
And if we're doing it wrong, then give us an idea how we can do it better. But the first step is bringing us all together.
Scott, you mentioned the sleeper buses, and I'm very excited to get into that in our next episode. So thank you both. Thank you all for watching, listening. Stay tuned to the next episode, because we will get into those sleeper buses and how they're important and how they're helping the community and our people at Matthew's Hope. So like, subscribe, and share with your friends, and we'll see you next time.
Before she closes, and keep the camera rolling here for a second, I want to congratulate you all for another year. I think this might be our third year We have been voted the best of the best nonprofit, but most importantly in all this, or what we're sitting, we've been voted the best of the best as our podcast.
Yeah.
And that's due to our viewership and people paying attention to what we're doing. John rocks it behind the camera. He spends a lot of time putting these questions together, doing research, watching videos. He probably puts more work into it than any of us.
Yeah.
And Tracy, for us, it's just a pleasant surprise every time you pronounce something correctly. So the beauty of it all is you guys are rocking, and I just want to say thank you that we have an award-winning thing going here, but we cannot do it without the public support and for them sending us our questions. Look, there's no question that is off the table. You want to criticize? Great. Just back that up with why you're criticizing it. You got an idea? We want to hear it. So now you can say thank you.
No, I love it. And he's right. Thank you all who are watching and sharing. We'll see you next time.